The Arch Gaming Network is proud to bring you this board game review. Now here's your host, Sean Smith.
Hello and thank you for stopping by. Today we are taking a look at Crusaders, Thy Will Be Done, which was designed by Seth Jaffe and published by Tasty Minstrel Games. Probably my favorite name for a game company. I don't know, I just giggle whenever I hear that name. However, this is a serious game. No, it's not. But it is set in medieval times, during the Crusades. It's a medieval themed game where you'll be sending your knights out to conquer European lands, construct buildings, and try to gain the most influence by the end of the game. And while your opponents are not your enemies per se, you are competing for valuable lands and trying to gain as much influence before they do and before the pool of influence runs out, which is a timer in this game. Now the game features a cool rondel mechanic. A rondel is basically an action wheel. It's just a circular wheel of different actions that you can take. I guess square wheels would be terrible, but this is a rondel, so it's circular and gives you different actions. You also have some asymmetrical powers that are going to affect the way that you use your rondel. Also, when you construct buildings or muster troops, it's going to make some of the actions that you take even more powerful. So why don't we take a look at how to set up, how to play, and then I'll give you my thoughts on the other side. All right, to set up the game board, the main board here, first of all, you're going to choose the side for the number of players that you have. In this case, we're going to play a 2-player game. So the map is a little bit smaller than the 3- and 4-player map. The game is also going to tell you how many, in this case 140, influence will be in the influence pool. Because the way that the game will end is once the 140 influence tokens have been taken, that's going to trigger the end of the game. Then all players except the start player will get one more turn, and then whoever has the most will win the game. All right, you have a bunch of enemy tokens here, all right? You have Prussians, Slavs, and Saracen. I'm going to refer these as gray, tan, and dark brown because, well, I'm an idiot.
Yes, indeed.
Anyway, you have a bunch of these enemy tokens, and you're going to place them onto the board wherever you have the circle with an enemy flag on them. And this you will just do randomly, like so. Alright, you also have a bunch of these building bonus tiles. Anywhere where you see a matching shape, again, you're just going to randomly place these out onto the board. Now the board will already have some already pre-printed. You won't cover those up, and you will use all of them, so there won't be anything to return to the box. You also need to get out one of the gray and the tan pieces because they will need to go here. This is going to indicate the current strength of the monsters. What game am I playing here? The current strength of the enemy that you'll need to defeat them. Next, you can place these out to the side of the board. These are for the end of the game. Part of this game is going to be set collection, okay? If you, for example, this one is for the Slavs, the tan ones. If you have the most of these tan ones defeated at the end of the game, then you're going to gain 5 influence. All right, if you were the second most, you're going to get 2. And then if there's ties, you flip them over and it'll show you what kind of points and how you divvy them up. Finally, you need to determine the player order. Whoever is second in this case, since we're playing a 2-player game, or whoever's last in a 3 or 4-player game, and then going counterclockwise, you're going to place your knight. So let's say we, as the purple player, will be going first. We can put the green player can put their knight on any one of these 2 starting spots that have the knight figure. Then the players, again in reverse turn order, will place them until everyone has placed one of their knights. All right, to set up your player board, you have a bunch of different building pieces and a couple of knights. You're going to fill them into these spaces as indicated here, starting with castles, churches, barns, and banks. So you'll just put one on each of those spots. Now when it comes to the castle spaces, you'll notice some have an icon that is a knight, so you're going to place one of your knights on that spot. All right, you have your soldiers, your troops, and they are numbered 1 through 5, and they're double-sided. They have a crusade icon on the other side. You're going to place them on the top of your board in numerical order 1 to 5. Okay, designate one player, and they are going to take their 6 action wedges. Now these action wedges are double-sided. They have either 2 actions at the top or 1 action at the top and then a grayed out action at the bottom. A player, any player, they just designate them. They're going to shuffle them and then place them randomly with the single action side face up, and they'll just fill out this area here. Once this is done, all other players are then going to copy it and set up their rondel in the exact same order. Players will then be given 12 of these action tokens, and you're just going to put 2 onto each wedge. Now you may get a special power, a knight power, that's going to affect the number that you have, and if so, you'll take care of that later, but for now, just place 2 on each wedge. Then each player is going to be given 2 randomly selected knight cards. All right. The players are going to choose which one they want to keep and place it right here so everyone knows what their power will be. And then you can return the other one to the box. Each player will also be given a double-sided player aid card, and you can just put that off to the side. Okay, since we took this particular knight action, and this one says, during the setup, and hopefully we can see that pretty well, during setup, remove 1 action token from the wedge of your choice. This tells you how many wedges, or how many of your action tokens you're going to get to play with. We're going to do 11, so we're going to have to get rid of 1. And let's say I remove it from influence.
You want me gone? Now,
as my special power here, it says once per turn when distributing action tokens, you may skip 1 wedge. And we'll talk more about why that would be a good power to have in a little bit. Anyway, that is how you would set up your player board. And now you're ready to play Crusaders. All right, to play Crusaders, the goal of the game is to have the most influence at the end of the game. In a 2-player game, there will be a pool of 140 influence to get. And that again is noted up here at the top of the board. You are going to set out influence tokens. You can set out influence tokens on the side of the board, which we forgot to do during the setup.
What an idiot.
Sorry. And they are valued 1, 5s, and 10s. You're going to put out, in a 2-player game, 140 of them, so that all players know how much influence is left before the end of the game. There are a lot of different ways that you can get victory points. Your player aid will denote this. For example, anytime that you take a build action, whatever the flag symbol is, and we'll talk about the levels of the buildings, the level of the troops that you muster, and the strength used when you take influence. This is telling you you're going to get influence points equal to whatever the level or the strength on the influence is. And then on the other side, this is kind of reminding you when you go to do a crusade, which is basically fighting, that you'll be getting victory points, or you'll get to do a special action when you're fighting the dark brown. But those are the different ways that you'll be getting victory points. Okay, so on your turn, you have one of two things that you can do, and it tells you right here at the bottom of the board what those two actions are. The first thing you can do is resolve an action. So you have 6 different actions. Well, you have 5 different actions, but you have 6 wedges to choose from. At the beginning of the game, the travel, and I'm sure you can see that, is repeated twice on the wedge. Now, whenever you take an action, the number of tokens or action tokens that are on that wedge is the power of that action that you can do on your turn. Now, we're going to see in a minute how those can be modified by building buildings or mustering troops. But for now, let's say I wanted to take the travel action. I would have a power of 2, which essentially means I would get to move my knight on the board 2 spaces with some restrictions, or if I had more than one knight, I could move each of them 1 space. Once you have taken that action, you're then going to redistribute these action tokens clockwise around the board, dropping off 1 in the space next to the space you just emptied, and continuing to go around until you have no more. Now, our special power allows us to skip a wedge. So in this case, if I didn't want to drop 1 off at influence, let's say I had these 2 back again, I could skip influence, place 1 here and 1 there. The other thing you can do on your turn is to upgrade a wedge. We talked about during the setup that these wedges are double-sided. On one side they have a single action, and it tells you, it gives you a grayed out action. This one is a build that you know is going to be on the other side. On the other side then, if you upgrade it, you'll get a crusade and a build action. When you do that, you just remove the action tokens from that wedge, turn it over, and replace the action tokens. You may now redistribute, you don't have to, but you may take all of the action tokens from one other wedge, it doesn't have to be the one that you just upgraded, and redistribute them. And because I have a special power, I could opt to skip one of these and like travel, and then just put it on influence. Now, there is technically a third action. As a third action, you may just redistribute all of the action tokens from one wedge around the board without taking an actual action to do that. It's very rare that you would do it, but the rules do allow for that. When you upgrade a wedge, that's all you do on that turn. It will then pass to the next player. So what are the different actions that you can do? Well, the first one we talked about was travel. When you take a movement action, you're going to spend the points as you leave your tile. So if I were to leave a tile that doesn't have an enemy, it's just 1 action point. However, if I were in a spot with an enemy and I didn't want to fight that enemy, instead I wanted to move past it or through it, it'll take 2 action points to move through any space that has an enemy. So if I wanted to move up to here, it would be 1 to leave this area and 2, 3 because there was an enemy here. You are allowed to stop on the same tile as your opponent or move through a tile with your opponent. It does not cost any additional movement penalty to do that. Okay, the next action you can do is to muster. That's this action here. And again, I've kind of put all of these back where they started, but I'm going to say move 1 over here to muster. I have a muster strength of 3. Now, when you're mustering, what you're doing is you are basically mustering these troops. You'll see at the bottom it has a number. This is the strength of the action points that you'll need to be able to muster that troop. When you do, you're going to get to turn it over. And now you're going to have an extra permanent crusade action whenever you decide to take that crusade action. When you muster a troop, let's say I decided to muster this, because it's a level 1, the yellow flag here, you're going to get 1 influence. And then you're just going to place that face up. You have to muster these troops in order from 1 to 5. Because I had done that, I can now redistribute these. So maybe I go 1 here, 1 here. I'll skip this one because I have a special power and put a 3rd one on the build action. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the build action. On your turn, one of the actions is you can build. You have 4 different types of buildings that you can build. We talked about them earlier: castles, churches, farms, and banks. Now, they are levels 1 through 4, and you have to build them in order. You don't have to build all level 1s first, but you must build your level 1 bank before you can build your level 2 bank, and so on. You'll also notice it will have that same symbol that we saw on the soldiers when you are mustering. That is the strength that you'll need to spend in action points to be able to build that building. Since I have a strength of 3, I could build this, or the farm, or the church, or the castle. Now underneath here, and it may be hard to see, let's take a look here. You'll see that it tells you what the bonus is going to be if you build that building. So if we built a bank, it's going to give us a +1 build action. So in the future, anytime I would take the build action, I have +1. So however many action tokens I have, plus however many of these symbols that are showing. As you get further, you're going to get 2 bonuses here. So whenever I take the influence action, I'm going to get an additional 1, or whenever I take the build action, I'll get a +1. And these are cumulative, so if I had all 3 of these built and unlocked, my build actions are now going to be a +3 in the future. As you can see, the cost also goes up to build them from 3 to 5 to 7. The barns are a little different. They have 3, 4, and 5. And these give you additional muster points. The church is going to give you additional influence, and they cost 3, 4, and 5, but they can also give you additional movement as well. And then your castles are going to allow you, the first time you build a castle, you're going to get to place your knight out on the board wherever you built that castle. So now you will have 2 pieces out there to go around and conquer lands and build buildings. And then it's going to give you, on the second castle, an extra movement point, then an extra crusade point, and you would then also unlock your second knight. Now, in the final column, you have victory point conditions. These are end games. If you build a level 4 building, this is going to tell you that you're going to get +4 victory points or influence for every level 4 building that you've built. For every knight and troop you have out on the board, you're going to get 1 victory point. So these things give you additional victory points if you can build a level 4. So when you go to build, let's say I wanted to build this bank, I have 3 action points. It costs 3. I can then take this and place it onto the board wherever I am at that has an open square for building. All right, when you want to build, and most players are probably going to build right off the bat because it is something that you can do with your first. You could move if you wanted, you could take influence if you wanted, but because you are on a spot that you could build a building and you could build one at a discount, most players are going to build on the first turn, but hey, you can play how you want.
There's no way you can stop me.
These tokens here, for example, this one here tells us that if you build a farm, it's going to cost 1 less strength to do that action. However, if you build a castle, you're going to gain 1 influence. On our tile, it says if you build either a church or a bank, you'll pay 1 less power. Well, we only have, let's say at the beginning of the game, you only have 2 power to spend. I was going to build a bank, so I can build it and put it right there onto that space. You can only have 1 building per space. Enemies cannot destroy them or use them in any way. And now, of course, you've unlocked a bonus, and now you've unlocked a bonus of an additional build strength for building a bank. All right, one more example here on the building. Let's say I was up here and this space was cleared out. This is telling me that if I build a church, I will get 1 extra influence. If I build a castle, though, I'm going to get 1 extra influence for that, 2 for this. Plus, of course, you get the influence for the building that you build. But keep in mind, you don't have to build a church. You don't have to build a castle there. These are just bonuses if you do build that particular building. You could build anything you want. I could put a farm there if I wanted. I just wouldn't get any of the bonuses. Once that's done, of course, you will get to redistribute these tokens. Maybe using my special power, I will skip the muster. All right, the 4th action you can do is crusade. Now, crusading is going out and fighting enemies on the main board.
Oh, yeah?
There
You
are
and
once
one
again 3
army.
types of enemies, wonderfully called dark brown, tan, and gray.
What?
Because that's so much easier to say. Anyway, if you are on a spot where there is an enemy token, you may use the crusade action to fight it. To beat that enemy, you have to have action point strength equal to or greater the current value that it takes to beat that enemy. Now, the dark brown, anyway, the dark brown ones always cost 6 to defeat. You always have to have 6. I have 5. However, I do have an additional crusade action because I mustered that troop earlier. And now, so I actually have a strength of 6. So if I was on a spot with one of those dark browns, I could defeat it. Now, the gray ones and the tan ones will depend on where their strength is on that strength track. Okay, let's say you were on a tile with an enemy. You may use your fight action and the strength of that fight action to fight the enemy in your space. The way you determine their strength is for the gray and the tan, you're going to look at their strength meter over here. At the beginning of the game, it takes 3 strength to defeat these enemies. So all you do is, as long as you have enough strength points, and that's going to be from the crusade action points you had, plus any troops that you've mustered, you'll then be able to take this token, and you have now cleared it up, and you can just put this to the side of your board, because remember, if you have the most of those, you're going to get additional influence at the end of the game. This space is now open to build something. All right, and unless you had, say, a double action of a crusade and build, you wouldn't be able to build right away. You'd have to wait till your next turn. But this space, because the enemy is gone, can now be built into. Now, something I forgot to mention earlier is that when you are on a spot and you defeat one of the gray or tan enemies, you will get, of course, the token to keep, but you also get influence equal to whatever that current strength was. So if I defeated that, which it's currently, as you can see, at a 3, I would get 3 victory points, and then you would move this down so that the next time you fought that enemy, it costs 4, and that would go for all players. Whichever player attacks that particular enemy next will have to have a power of 4. If you wanted to fight one of these saccharins,
I don't know.
Saracens. Anyway, the strength for these are always going to be 6. The dark brown ones, it's always 6 action points to defeat them. Okay, so that will not change. What does change is what happens when you defeat them. Now, regardless of what you do, you will get this token, and you will get to keep it, and again, because you're going to try to collect the most. But they have a symbol on here, and this is going to offer you a choice. For this particular symbol, this means that you are allowed to, for free and right away, muster your leftmost troop for free. You can just do it right now, and then you're going to get victory points for mustering that troop. Let's say it was a level 2 troop. You would then get 2 victory points plus muster that troop. The other thing you could do is just take 3 victory points. So it's your choice, either 3 victory points, or you get to take whatever the action is on that particular tile. All right, let's say you were down here. Wasn't that adorable? No, I didn't think so. All right, let's say you decided you were here and you fought this enemy here. This allows you to build a church for free. So you would take a church, slap it down right there, and you get to place that for free. And then you'll collect victory points for whatever level church that was. But you're not required to build a church there. You could just leave it blank. Again, you would still collect this token, trying to collect the most of them, and not build the church at all. And maybe the reason you would do that, you would maybe just take the 3 victory points instead of building the church. It would be because maybe you wanted to build something else, and on your next turn, or if you happen to have a double action of crusade and build, you would now be able to build one of these buildings, or maybe you have to wait till your next turn. So this one here says if you build a barn, it's going to cost you 1 less to build it, or if you build a bank, you're going to get an additional influence. All right, well, let's say that this was over here instead when we were doing that action. All right, and that this was right here. I defeat the enemy. I decide I do want to build a church. Okay, so I would place my church there because this token here says that if you build a church, they will come. You will get an additional influence. So you would get influence for the level of the church that you just built, plus you would get 1 additional influence as well, because that is the bonus tile that is sitting there. Now when you use them, you can either remove them from the board or you can turn them over. It's up to you what you want to do with them. So that is how you will fight the various enemies out on the main board. Now, before we move on to our final action that you can take, let's talk about these double action wedges. What you can do with those is you can assign action points to each action, different action. These wedges allow you to do 2 different actions. So maybe I assign 2 to the Crusades action and 3 to the build action. Well, my strength for my Crusade is actually going to be a 3 because I have 2 here and 1 of those. And my build action is actually going to be a strength of 4 because I have an extra build action here and 3 on there. You can now take those actions. When you take those actions, you must fully resolve 1 action before you can move on to the other. Therefore, you wouldn't be able to do, if you had a double action with a travel, say, you couldn't move, build, and then move again. You would have to completely move, finish that, then build. In this case, maybe I was going to fight one of the gray tokens and it was a strength value of 3. I have a strength of 3, so I would defeat them. And now, because that space is now open, I would be able to then take this build action. And since it's a strength of 4, I could, I could not build this. It's a level 5, but I could build any one of these other ones. So maybe I would build the barn, get a victory point, which I don't think I mentioned that earlier. Whenever you build a building, you're going to get influence or victory points equal to whatever the level is for for the building that you've just built. Of course, once you've done taking your actions, then you could redistribute them once per wedge. All right. Now let's talk about the last action that you can take. And the last action is influence. And this basically is just giving you straight up victory points. Let's say I had this building built earlier in the game, and it's my turn to take an action, and I decide to do influence. You're just going to gain influence tokens equal to the strength plus any uncovered buildings that will also give you additional influence. So in this case, if I took this action, I would just get 3 victory points or influence points, and then I could redistribute them along the wedges. So play will continue. Players will continue to go out and conquer lands, build buildings, muster their troops, collect influence points for all the different actions that they take, and that play will continue until all 140 in a 2-player game influence tokens have run out. Once that happens, you will have equal number of turns, so everyone who hadn't taken a turn up to the start player will get to take one last turn. You can still get influence points, just use a suitable replacement. As long as you're not playing a 4-player game, you'll have some leftover influence tokens. Otherwise, just find a suitable substitute. And that is how you play Crusaders. Okay, so that is Crusaders. I will be done. Now, let's talk about the components for a moment. They are top-notch. In fact, it seems like TMG is, at least in the last few games that I've played from them, really concerned about quality components. I did a review of Pioneer Days, and that game had great components in it. This one does too. You have these thick cardboard components in there, like your influence tokens, your knight power cards, your rondel wedges. Very durable, very thick, and should last you quite a while. The game board is beautifully designed, lots of colors. The player boards are easy to understand as far as, you know, what additional actions you're going to take and the strength it takes to build certain things. They're really good. You also have these wooden pieces in there. For the different buildings that you will construct, each having their own nice design and cutout. I think they are top-notch. The only thing I would say I'm not a fan of is that player aid card. Sure, it's thick and durable and will last a while, but I think it's cryptic how they list the different ways that you can get points. It's a little confusing for new players. They just don't know what it is, and then by the time you do know what it is, you no longer need that player aid anyway. So that'd be the only thing about the components. Otherwise, they are fantastic. And I would say, in general, TMG has put out quality components for many of their games. I'm thinking of Pioneer Days, which I did a review on. Great components. This one, also awesome. All right, let's talk about the gameplay. I really like Crusaders. I think the rondel mechanism is great, and I would probably like to see more of that style in different games. It really forces you to carefully consider your moves, 1 or 2 moves in advance, to make sure that you're going to have enough action points to do the strength of the actions that you want to do. But at the same time, you have to be able to adjust quickly, because you have an ever-changing environment, because the other players, they're going to move into places that you thought you were going to go to. Or, as what happened to me, you know, you clear out an enemy, then somebody else comes down and builds in a building that builds in a tile that you were ready to build in the next turn. So while you have to plan, you can't plan too far in advance, because other players can make you have to change your strategy on the fly. So it's a great balance here. There isn't any direct player interaction per se, but you certainly can interrupt or ruin someone else's plans by doing something that they had planned on doing. So you have to pay attention to where everyone is going, what they're doing, what the strength of the enemies could be or will be by the time it gets to your turn again. Again, it's fantastic in that regards. Now, I didn't go over a bunch of the variable knight powers. We only looked at the one in the review, but there are a bunch of them, and I really like them. When I go through them, every power seems as good as the next. So I want to keep trying different ones each time I play. So to me, that makes it feel like that's going to be very well balanced between the different powers. There's one power that allows you to go counterclockwise when dropping off your action tokens. If you want, you can go either clockwise or counterclockwise. Again, great power, and I think all of the power cards in there are really well balanced. The game at its core, to me, it's relatively easy to learn, but it offers some thought-provoking choices. One of the most painful for you to make would be when you have to decide if you want to upgrade a wedge. This is because it's the only thing that you get to do during that turn. So it almost feels like you're wasting a turn. However, it also gives you much more powerful options in the future. If you have a bunch of action points on a wedge with 2 actions, to be able to do 2 actions in one turn is a great feeling. Even like in the example or in the playthrough in that, I think we talked about doing the crusade and build action in the same turn. That can be great to do because you've cleared out an enemy. You don't want someone else coming in on their turn and building in a spot you took the time to be able to, clear out. So to be able to build and crusade on the same action is very important. And I like the different choices and ways that you have to decide, okay, is it time to upgrade this wedge? Or do I want to take an action I really want to get to do? I like that you can approach victories different ways. Are you going to be someone who goes out and musters all your troops and then goes on and fights and gains a bunch of victory points that way? Or maybe you're looking to build a bunch of buildings, maybe max out a couple of building types so that you can get additional bonuses at the end of the game. As weird as it sounds, I like the fact that you can't get everything done that you kind of want to do, because it makes you want to come back and play the game again and try maybe a new tactic. I also really like the engine building feeling to the game, because as you construct your buildings or muster troops, you're strengthening other actions in the game. Now, the game length feels just right. Early game, like a lot of your engine builders, it's going to feel like it's going to take a long time for that influence pool to deplete, because people are slowly building up their engines. But as you're building those buildings and mustering troops, you are making your future actions stronger so that you can gain more influence. And I feel like the game ramps that up very nicely. I think the game scales well. I like it at all player counts. You have the 2-sided boards, which I think evenly distributes gameplay on the different player counts that you could play. So I definitely recommend this game. I've enjoyed every play that I've had of it. Other people who have played it, they've all had positive reviews for Crusaders. It has a good depth of strategy without being overly complicated in gameplay. It has that cool rondel mechanic, and the production is just very well done. So for me, I give this game a 9. Now, if you've enjoyed this review, please take a moment to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to our channel, and check out our other great content. And once again, I thank you for stopping by.
Thank you for visiting the Arch Gaming Network. For more great content, check us out at archgamingnetwork.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook.